Thanks everyone for coming today. Basically, I'll try to kind of, through my presentation, demystify what the residency in New York is. I'll have a very brief introduction of kind of structurally how the residency works, what we basically do for residents, and then I'll give some examples of the past Chalupecký award winners, what they've done, and luckily we have Roman and Barbara here, so they'll talk a little bit firsthand, and then we'll maybe engage in, I'd like to have maybe some conversation. I think an important thing, what we see from not only Chalupecký winners, but generally residents who come to New York, are expectations of New York. Like what does it mean when you come to New York? What can that bring to you or not? What are your kind of short-term or long-term goals from the context of New York? I think that that's something that's very important and sometimes gets sidelined. So I'd just like to kind of tackle that question. So this is what our space looks like. We don't have the whole church. Everybody comes and they're like, wow, you have all this space, but we only have part of it, the old nave, which is only about 1,000 square feet, which is about 250 square meters. It's on 2 levels. The downstairs level is what we use as an event space and a shared working space, and upstairs are our offices in a small conference room. We average about 16 artists in residence at any given time. Sometimes it's a little less. Usually we start the year with 10, 12, and the fall is always kind of crazy. We usually have 19, 20 in the fall, but we say average of 16, about 48 artists per year and 8 curators. We have a small curatorial residency as well. This is just giving you some examples, because there's always this question of that we don't have in our budget that we get from the Trust for Mutual Understanding, which is basically the foundation who pays for all of the residents to come. We don't have in that budget to cover an individual studio. So artists have to work from our shared working space, and so far it's worked well. Also bearing in mind that the residency is only 2 months. I do believe that if you came to New York for the first time for 2 months and just closed yourself off in a studio in the context of New York, I don't think that's the most fruitful thing. If you're somewhere in the Alps, yes, in a small village, but I don't think it's the best possible use of your time in New York. This is an example actually of the artist to the left was a winner of the Macedonian Prize. She was editing a video that she shot during her residency, and she didn't know, she wasn't a very skilled editor, so we had an artist in residence from Turkey who's next to her. He was helping her edit her new piece. And they're using the big screen to do that. These are just kind of like some examples of upstairs, this our small conference room with when artists gather. I forget exactly what they were doing there. Just gives you a sense of the space. We have what we call a guest visitors program. So basically, each week every resident gets a schedule from our assistant. And in that schedule, there's outlined what activities are organized for each week. So you can kind of manage your time. So on Monday, you get your schedule for the following week. There's always one, we call it studio visit, but it's in this conference room, so you basically show your work on your laptop. On the left is a Jenny Noormani, who is the curator from HIAP in Helsinki. Most of the guest visitors are from New York, but sometimes because people come from all over the world to New York and we know them, or they want to come see the residents, sometimes you will see somebody that might not be from New York. We try as much as we can to really focus. Oh yeah, also the guest visitor sees 4 people. We pay them an honorarium. They see 4 people, so each visit is about 40 minutes, and they see people consecutively. So you'll, in your schedule, you'll get you'll see so-and-so at 10:20 on a Tuesday, and then you'll get the bio of the person. We try to obviously match as much as we can the practice of the artists and the guest visitors. Sometimes we hope that it works 100% of the time, but I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. Sometimes, you know, conversations are less fruitful than not. The ones that are the least fruitful we found are with gallerists, because I think it's a little bit of a power play where they know that they're in a power position and they usually ask the least questions. They kind of think that, you know, usually it ends up being like a kind of narration of the artist, and they don't give that much feedback. Obviously, that can be a generalization. Either there are some wonderful dealers that have, you know, critical thinking, but that's what we've found out from residents. So yeah, just as a side note. This was a photographer from Finland to the left, and this was a curator, photography-based curator, and she also teaches photography at NYU. This was a funny one. This is somebody I know that I curated shows in her commercial space in Milan. So she's a dealer, but she was on vacation and she brought her whole family. That's her husband and her 3 children. So it was kind of like a family studio visit, and that's a French artist. These are sort of the monthly programs that we have for residents, because not everybody is living in the same house. You're kind of like scattered around. We try to do about 5 programs per month where we bring everybody together so the residents get to know each other. So each first of the month, usually on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, there's a welcome breakfast for all the new residents that are coming in. Obviously, as somebody is there for a couple of months, old ones stay, new ones come, so just everybody gets to know each other, others' names. Then there's always artist presentations on a weekly basis, because you know, you might know somebody by face, but you might not know really what their practice is about. That's always done in our space. So usually 3 to 4 artists present their work. That tends to be usually on a weekly basis. Depends how many artists we have at a time. Then we try to do workshops from time to time. Albert's Foundation one on the color theory is really fun. I try to take some of those sometimes, and that's reoccurring, and other ones as well. We don't do them on a monthly basis though, but here and there we throw in some workshops. And then we started, from a year ago, we started a new program during the day that's called Meet Over Lunch. It's a series where it's from 1 to 2. And we invite curators that are either curators in residence or sometimes curators that just come, either live in New York or come from elsewhere. They talk about their practice, and it's also like a good opportunity for artists to meet the curators. This was Avi Lubin from Israel, from the Hamidrasha Gallery. And another one was an independent curator, Tiago de Abreu, who works between Madrid and Sao Paulo. Then we always do, once a month, we visit a New York-based artist studio. We also try to do different stages of career of artists, so people see what does it mean if somebody's like an emerging artist. They might work out of their kitchen, or this guy had a pretty huge studio. I think it was in Bushwick. I didn't go in this, and he was sort of like mid-career. Sometimes I think it's important for artists from other parts of the world to kind of like understand what it means to be an artist in New York in different kind of stages of their career and different practices. We also take them to field trips. We try to do it to places that are a little bit off the beaten path. We're not going to take them to MoMA, the new museum, or metropolitan places that they'll go by themselves. We usually try to know somebody from the institution or the curator. This was in Connecticut at the Bruce Museum. It was a tour of Russian cosmism, and Ksenia Nurel, who was the curator of the exhibition, gave us a tour. This is a really cool small little museum in Chinatown. It's called the Museum of Chinese American. And the curator there gave us a tour of the permanent collection, and then whatever show they had. And you can see Martin there Martin Carhart behind the glass case. This was also a nice trip to the Rauschenberg Foundation. They have a pretty amazing space in downtown Manhattan. And this is kind of like a logistical thing that we do with artists, but I think it's important I think this kind of like ties into expectations. I just took a snapshot of what every artist gets. It's a questionnaire that we send to them before they come to the residency, 4 to 5 months. And this basically for us becomes the blueprint of the residency. As you can see, 80% of the artists give us answers that are either we don't know, to be determined. This is what I want to stress. The more information we get on this questionnaire, like the more we can actually help artists achieve what they want. Sometimes they're like more detailed than others. We understand that it's also important that information can change, because you might have done this 6 months before you came to New York and your ideas change. That's totally fine. But we can do our job better the more information we get. This is actually Martin's questionnaire. So, I mean, this is sort of like public, information we don't like. So, but I just want to like stress that this is also part of, kind of like what happens in New York, but really these 5 simple questions are something that gives us more material to work with and to understand what you want to do in New York. And it's basically, and from, just so you understand, from our standpoint of view, we don't have any mandates that an artist either produces anything, or if they don't want to have a public program towards the end, which 95% of them want to use that experience to do something. There were a few times that artists didn't want to do anything, and that's fine for us. I think personally that it's counterproductive if you kind of press an artist to do something that they don't want to do. But these 5 simple questions, kind of like what kind of project support, network support, who would you like to meet, do you have any project specifics, results and achievements, and how do you see us supporting you, is really something important for us to kind of understand before you come, because 2 months go really quickly. So the more information we get, as I said, it doesn't have to be 100%, it can change, but the more we have beforehand, the more we can support the residency of the artist. This is something that we can kind of get back towards the end of the presentations, but I think it's really important to discuss artist expectations. What does a residency in New York mean for somebody when they arrive? What does the award mean? And I just use this because I'm in Prague here now, but there are 11 of these awards. What does the award mean in the certain country, and how does that translate in New York for somebody that might not even know where Prague is, a curator, or like, Eastern Europe or Central Europe is a big blob, You have to think about those things when you're in the context of New York or the United States, and then how can you make most advantage of a 2-month stay in New York. And I was going to take this opportunity now just to kind of highlight how the past, so this first part of the presentation was just kind of like very practical, kind of how the residency is structured. I don't know if there are any, and I forgot to say, like, at any time, if anybody has a comment or question, it doesn't have to be just me talking the whole time. But since I'm going to go into the second part now of the past winners, if anybody has any questions or comments in what I talked about, because this was purely how we structure it from our end on any artist in residence that comes for any amount of time, whether it's 2 months, 6 months, or a year. It's pretty much the same. Yep.
You were talking about sort of a final project at the end of the 2 months that one might or might not choose to take part in.
Mm-hmm.
Where and how is the subject? Project.
Well, there are two things of that. There could be a project that you're working on that doesn't have necessarily to be presented to the public. People have done that in the past, whether it's like sometimes it's like heavily research based. So we've had like instances where we were introducing to their research either to academicians, or it was like super, I don't know, one artist from Finland worked with somebody from the Natural History Museum on an archive, things like that. So we're like helping facilitate their research that's not necessarily presented. Or we had people that shot videos or did, series of portraits or things like that that weren't necessarily presented. So it can be both. And then there's a second part, which I will give now examples. Usually if it is something of a final product, it's shown at our space, and it's always like a one evening program. So it's three things. It's some either kind of talk, a performance, or a screening. Sometimes I have a shot of an artist from Bulgaria. She actually wanted to show works that she produced, paintings. So that can be done as well. You'll see a slide of that. But usually in the capacity, because we work with 50 artists per year, it has to be at our space. We are not able to program anything elsewhere, or like, curate full-blown exhibitions or things like that, because we are a residency program. Does that answer the question? Yep. Is there anything else?
So are you talking about if multiple artists want to present their final work at your space, are they then like a consecutive solo exhibitions opening day after another?
No, we had actually an instance where two artists wanted to do a performance together, and then we combined it. We had an artist from Portugal and the Oscar Chapin, Katerina Hruškova, last year's winner from the Oscar Chapin Award. They both wanted to do a performance, and then we kind of talked to them and combined something and did a one night event of both their combined performances, because we have a programming calendar that we kind of have to follow, and it has to make sense. So you can't we would never do 3 consecutive things in a day, because nobody would come 3 consecutive days to see anything. So you kind of pretty much can't have more than 2 to 3 programs maximum per month. So that's kind of like, you have to have in consideration like the whole month or the trimester, and see how many artists you have, and kind of like block out when what is done. So yeah.
But as I heard, Matthias Kuchola did something outside. No?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. He actually, found a space himself outside, although we had to kind of guarantee and kind of like write documents that whatever, because he couldn't do it as an individual, we did as an organization. But yeah, that was a case where he had a specific project in mind, he identified a space, and then we were kind of behind it, supporting it on different levels. But I'll actually speak about that because I have slides of that. But now we're actually going to talk about you. So Roman was with us in 2016, and he decided to present an evening where he presented his practice works in progress that he did, his influences, and it was called Knock, 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 Who's There? A door is between us, open up. Usually we try to talk to the artists to see towards the beginning what they would like to do, if there is a moderator that we would like, sometimes it's us, if there's a moderator that we should invite to be a co-speaker or curator with them. Actually, I was impressed. Roman was super organized. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he didn't actually, which I was fine with it, he didn't really need our help because you knew exactly what you wanted to do. So it was you presenting, obviously we talked about, the flat screen that you needed, the kind of different configuration, how you wanted to use the space, but I would say that he was somebody who very clearly knew how he wanted to present his work. There are other people that take our suggestions, or I'm not going to name names. We had a very recently, it was partially because it was a very young artist, but I literally had to meet with her 4 times to kind of like determine what, like in one evening thing, and there was like changes till the last minute, and even during the presentation, during the public talk, she was saying it began kind of like, well, this is not what I envisioned, in front of the public, and then I didn't actually get furious. I was like next to her, I was kind of teasing her, and then it was kind of like a ping pong between her and me. So I was like, so what did you, I took the microphone and I said, like, well, what did you envision? And then we were going back and forth for about 2 minutes until she started laughing and she said, well, this is now becoming like ridiculous. And I thought, it was, the message was sent out. But anyways, this was just kind of like to tell you that there's like very different ways how we go about this, and I'll show you some examples. Right now we're just going through the Chalupecký Awards, but I'm just going to give a few other examples from artists from the YBAA network, what they give, just so it kind of gives you an idea. And this is just another slide of Roman's talk. He's going to tell us a little bit more in a second, like I'll ask a few questions, but my impression was that Roman really took the time while he was in residence to really meet with a lot of different people. You also had some specific, I think this is a good example where somebody has a specific project that they would like to pitch to an organization. In this case, it was the Anthology Film Archives that I happen to know people there because I did a project there. We facilitated a meeting for them. He met with them. He presented a project that he wanted. They kind of said no to the project, but later on invited him for a screening of his work. So again, it was some sort of like fruitful, even though it went through a different channel. I believe if the work is disseminated, it's still a fruitful thing to do. And I think this is the things that we really don't have control over, what happens after these meetings, if something really comes out of it. But it was really nice that we had a curator in residence from Wales, Louise Hobson, who met with Roman for a studio visit, and then it turned out shortly afterwards she was curating the Cardiff Contemporary, which is some sort of version of a biennial festival in Cardiff, and Roman was included in it. But I just wanted to ask you what was maybe like the most valuable thing from you for the residency.
I won the prize in 2014, but I went there in 2016, so a little bit later after the war. So it was same for you. Yeah. And I was lucky because in that time Karina became director of the prize. So this change from ISCP to Residency Unlimited happened, and when I was speaking with people who were in New York and had the great expectations, I have to say that I didn't expect anything special. So I went there just to be surprised, let's say, and I was very surprised by these opportunities I had. As you said, the very first meeting I had was with Louis Hobson, and at the end of 2016 I appeared in Cardiff, having a wonderful show at Cardiff Contemporary, and it was the very first meeting I had at Residency Unlimited. And the last meeting I had was with Sarah Reisman from Rubin Museum, the 8th floor gallery, and she also invited me to exhibition. It was a little bit funny, and I remember you were laughing because I got the opportunity from Sarah to exhibit at Meat Factory in Prague. I went to New York to exhibit in Meat Factory, but the program or the show she built up somehow continued a few months later at Rubin Foundation as well. So then I had a show at the 8th floor.
Via Prague.
Not just in Prague, but so it was great, and I have to say that, as you already mentioned, the idea to have a studio. Of course, I didn't have a studio. I lived in a small shared flat my flatmate was Diego, who became later my friend. Mm-hmm. So he a year after he came to Prague, and I was hosting him. Mm-hmm. So and we established this friendship, and it was perfect. And yes, I kind of. I'm a type of artist who loves presenting his work, so I was enjoying this opportunity to meeting people and showing them my stuff. I can imagine that this can be quite stressful for someone who don't like it.
It is, but at the end they tell us that they kind of learn how to present their work better, or talk about their work, or have to defend their own ideas, because a lot of times after school or graduate school there are not many opportunities to do that on a regular basis.
Yes, and I can imagine that it can be hard for someone who doesn't speak English. Mm-hmm. What happened when I was there, because what was his name? Jan Zelinka.
Yeah, that was a bit of a challenge.
Jan Zelinka, winner of Oscar Chapman Award 2015, arrived during my stay to New York just to enjoy the city, and who was barely able to speak English. Mm-hmm. So it was good.
But actually, it turned out that he went to all the he had somehow he narrated in English what he talks about the work. It was, like a poem, but he really went to a lot of museums and things, and I think he was at the Metropolitan 5 times or something like that, and he was enamored by just sort of like looking at art for 2 months. He was at all the museums multiple times, and somehow it worked. It seems that there are different ways how people take advantages.
But back to what I somehow experienced. I have to say that these studio visits were perfect, and I have made a great list of curators and people I'm still in touch with. That's great. That's something what still what I'm still using.
Well, that's good. That's good.
These contacts. So I'm sending them some updates. So, yeah, and I started. I did some. I recorded video there. It wasn't finished at the time when I was presenting my work, but I finished it later.
Later, yeah.
And, I'm very happy that it was possible.
That's what I tell artists always, if they can, to do some sort of sketches while they're in New York, whether it's video or something that they can later then develop in their studio, just to take some sort of opportunity to, it doesn't have to be a finished work, but to use the time and inspiration and some sort of snapshots of something that can be later developed.
And I started also another important project of my life, because I got engaged there. My current wife, so she arrived for last 2 weeks of my stay, and I took her to Coney Island Beach and asked her.
I actually found out today that this is the second engagement. Katarina Hruškova from Slovakia also got engaged last year, but also at Coney Island. So when he told me, she's like, yes, we went to Coney Island and her boyfriend proposed to her. Like, so that's great. We have like, well, I think we'll have to put that in our highlights.
And I think like in Meat Factory, most of the couples actually broke up. So it's different karma, but like residencies did not yet.
Different residency have different effects on relationships.
So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to add. What I wanted to
Cool.
say. And it's a good thing because Chalupecký is
yes.
related to Chalupecký work, and she's living
Right around the corner.
Yeah.
And she's amazing.
So it was nice also the opportunity to visit her. And there's also nice sushi place just because.
All the good things, yeah.
So enjoy.
Lots of things to look forward. It's literally across the street. Cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Matias's project that he did. He did a performance that was called King of the Storm performance, and his project actually changed a little bit. When he arrived, he had a much more, even though this is pretty ambitious what he did, but what he wanted first was even more ambitious. He wanted to, he wanted to work with local hip-hop rappers to kind of create like a new song, a specific thing. He thought that, I kind of pointed him where he should hang out, although I told him this, a lot of, this happened to us before, like a lot of people who come from Europe don't necessarily know the racial tensions, nuances that happen in New York, what it means being like a white person and interacting with it, just because the United States still has baggage basically from the Civil War that, the slavery question, the racial it's not resolved basically. It's kind of still under the surface, and it's something that has to be, you have to be really very careful how you deal with these things. So I think that he soon realized that what he wanted to do as a white man that doesn't really live in New York, that's kind of there temporarily, that he couldn't really do. And just as a side note, we had an artist, we had an artist from Amsterdam last year that actually, this is just to give you like an example how delicate these things are. He actually managed to do, my colleague connected him to some rappers that she knew on her street, and he actually managed to produce a song with them. He had a nice budget, so he actually paid them, so they were compensated for what he did. But this is something that happened for the opening, we had a screening. He did an installation of it in our space. He invited them, and then at the very end, so it was just the video of a loop, he kind of pressured them to actually perform live, and that was never the agreement. And we heard afterwards that they were really not content with that this sort of like, one thing was in an exhibition that they were producing the piece for a video, and then at the opening that it all of a sudden turned like on the spot, like, oh, let's do it. Nothing was, you know, they kind of like became entertainment for a purely white crowd, you know, because, you know, we might have 2 black people who come to our, I mean, it's just the fact, who are our audience, and we knew that, because my friend knew them, that they felt very uncomfortable. So I'm giving you just this as an example of where they collaborated, and then this happened, and it kind of like didn't, you know, it wasn't like a good taste for them. So I could see how, you know, Matthias, who really didn't know them, or he wasn't any, you know, he didn't have really like a production budget, so that didn't go the way he wanted. But nevertheless, he had these other musicians that he found. We also connected him to one musician. He actually found a space not far from us in Gowanus, that we kind of signed a contract that we were the guarantors for it, and we were the we went there with him to set up and clean up afterwards. So he had this like spectacular entrance during the day in this like not an SUV, what is this, like a red Jeep. And in the press release, he had collaborators included Kung Fu masters, funk masters, and jazz gurus. So these are the guys that, it was basically like orchestrated jam sessions with these musicians that he found. But actually Gocha, who is to the far left, Sinje, he's a friend of ours, so we kind of connected him with him, so he took part with it. But then the other guys, I don't know where he found them. This guy, I had to do a like vertical because it couldn't fit. He looked like a semi-homeless person to me, but I don't know where he found him, but something was, it was really hilarious, like all of them together. Something was a little off with him, so that's why I wanted to like include him, but nevertheless, he was part of the jam. And then Matthias premiered his new song, Smooth Elevator, during the performance. And this is what the performance looked afterwards, when, because there was a lot of like other kind of elements, sushi, food, paint, that was kind of, that was involved in the performance. So that was kind of like what he worked on during his residency, and that happened towards the very end. So that was Matthias, and then we go to Barbara. So Barbara's residency was kind of like, her program was predetermined with Karina and Art in General, so we knew that she would be doing the performance Hand Over Heels at Art in General, and we knew that the piece was coming from China, the inflatable sculpture, and then as it is sometimes in life, we all know with production and things, sometimes things don't go as scheduled. And this was the case, that the hand came with a different color, not the color that she anticipated. So we had to come up with a plan to redo the hand, and we didn't have a lot of time. So we found like a producer who did the, what do you call it, spray, was it spray paint?
Yeah, no, well, hand paint.
Hand paint, right.
It wasn't spray.
Right.
Yeah, so
We painted it.
Right. So the two of you worked hard. What is it, 3 days in a row?
I don't know.
I think it was 2 or 3 days in a row, and we had to we had to kind of figure it out. But it all. Sorry?
What was the original color?
Just like bright pink, sort of.
Right.
Yeah, and it wasn't meant to be, and yeah. So.
Sorry.
This
is kind of very racialized.
It looked like a very sunburned hand.
So yeah, it was big. So actually, you can see here how it was supposed to be and what it came. And Barbara was working really hard. She was coming at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I think it was also another thing to consider. It was like you were there with a small baby, you know.
Yeah,
so I think that's something also to take into consideration when, you know, you have to come with another human being that you have to take care of. So we tried to be as flexible as we can. And actually we have last year, the winner from the Macedonian award, she came with her daughter who was 6 years old, and sometimes she had to come for studio visits with her, and she would just kind of park her at a desk and put a little laptop, and she would watch cartoons for 45 minutes or whatever. But we really tried to accommodate residents who have children as much as we can. We don't have really facilities for that, but that was something that we took into consideration, and we also facilitated as much as we could the casting for the performers, for you, and then later in collaboration with Chalupecký, we did the payments and everything. So in that sense, we kind of also helped a little bit with the production of a predetermined program that we really didn't have anything to do with in terms of curation or finding a space, but it was something that we knew that it made sense to have the residency. If you have an exhibition, it makes much more sense to doing during the residency period. But yeah, I wanted to ask you just how, because having two factors actually 3 factors, a big performance that you had to pull off, something went wrong in production that you had to kind of figure out, fix, and having a small child.
Yeah.
All those 3, I mean, it's a lot to deal with in 2 months.
That's true.
In retrospect.
So for me, it's sort of, it was the other way around maybe than what you mentioned with other artists who are staying and leaving with half produced works, but not finished. So for me, it was that I came with sort of pre-designed work, and I just had to finish it there or produce it, finalize it. So yeah, this was a little bit unexpected. I sort of liked the fact that I had the existing objects which come from a very specific location, from China, and working with precarious performers. It all fit well to the performance and legend, but then this was a very unexpected situation. And my son was 5 months old when I came to New York, and so we had to deal with all those weird situations. But otherwise, I mean, this was amazing what you managed to help me to fix the situation. Otherwise, I don't know what would I do. Also, with looking for performers, that was really important because art in general wasn't supportive at all in this sense. I mean, they were very nice and so on, but basically just with the production that wasn't the case. So I mean, I remember myself going to art in general from Residency Unlimited, and just with stroller, I was walking around the seashore, having those beautiful, walks, and just going there with the hands in the stroller. Otherwise I didn't know how to get it there. So it was really funny. I completely the throat was destroyed afterwards, but yeah, that was funny. What else to say? It was 8 hours long performance, and it was really kind of a lot of work to do on it. So for me, it was also helpful that you managed to sort of borrow me the space to work with the performance.
I had the rehearsals, right? I forgot about that. Yeah.
And all the other things, as I came with the child, I also didn't have any expectations, whatsoever. I remember some artists complaining about the amount of the presentations with the curators. For me, it was just enough, and I was very happy about the amount and people I met.
I wanted more.
I think you didn't have your kid there at the time. That's fine, I guess. I stayed at Charlotte's.
Right, you were just around the corner.
Because, as I had a child, I didn't have this opportunity to basically just use the room through Airbnb. So, but that was really amazing.
Oops. I think that makes sense if you don't have anything. Yeah, the last one that I'm just... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've been in New York before. I was on Cooper Union for the exchange. So that was completely different experience of New York, how it is. And this time I didn't have the chance to,
explore more.
Yeah, with the kid. But I enjoyed it very much, and it's amazing location as well. Yeah, for sure, that's true.
Yeah, it's a nice neighborhood where it's located. And the last person that we had last year was Martin Kohat, and he actually didn't have. I think because he had a lot of. This is sometimes that we see that it's the case if artists come to New York to the residency from a track where they've been producing a lot or had a lot of exhibitions. They kind of don't want to have, too heavy of a load during the residency. Just kind of explore and have meetings. I feel that was the case with Martin. What we did with him is that we screened his. 2 of his movies, 2 of his videos, I should say, which were the last one that he did in London, that's called Screening About Night Shifts, and that was we had Frankie Altamura from the New Museum that had a conversation with him. And we actually had a really a good turnout for this event. I think partially when you have artists that don't live in New York, it's always a question, you know, who is going to be the audience, because he did have some following in New York because of his work, and I think a mix of Frankie being a local curator who had somewhat of a following. We had a good turnout, and their conversation actually ended up being longer than it was a good reception, because you know it's always good when people want to stay over the allotted time. We usually try not to be more than an hour, 15 minutes between an hour, because literally, I don't know how it is here, but in New York, literally people will leave before it ends. If they get bored, if they go over time, it doesn't matter that it's not finished, they just start leaving. And with them, I remember that it really went like, it was already 9 o'clock or 8:30, 8:45, they were still going on, and we usually start at 7. So that was a good program. And right now, I'm just going to give you just a few little examples, just very quickly, of other people, just so you see what they kind of did for their programs. These are the 2 performances by the Portuguese artists, and Catarina de Oliveira and Katarina Hruskova, who was last year's Oscar Chapin finalist. And then this was an artist, Mark Podlep from Slovenia, who wanted to shoot a new video going in a kayak around Manhattan. So this was kind of crazy what we did. My colleague's husband, they found a kayak on Craigslist in New Jersey, and then my colleague's husband drove there to get the kayak. Then we didn't know how to get the kayak into his apartment, so they went onto the roof of the building and got it in through the window, because it couldn't go through the, I don't know, I wasn't there, through the door. Anyways, at the end, he produced a new work, really like videotaping himself with the kayak, and we presented it. I guess it was a success story. And this is a duo from Kosovo, Dardan Jegova and Lola Silaj, who also did a new piece on the Brooklyn. They borrowed our equipment, because we do have some AV equipment and we have some editing. At the time, my colleague Sebastian was doing editing for them of this video. They also filmed in Times Square at night. And this was really funny. The last slide is because they were filming, some Japanese tourists thought that they were like some actors or celebrities, so that they wanted to take photographs with them. So that's them with some tourists on Times Square while they were filming. And this is Martina Vacheva from Bulgaria. She was here the year before last, and she basically had a talk at our space, but she also wanted to present her paintings. She did these paintings on silk that she produced during the residency. And she did a lot of her work is inspired by pop culture, and this is Sex and the City. The girls from Sex and the City, that's a painting that she did. So that's it for me. We can either do questions or comments, or I don't know, however you would like to end.
I actually wanted to ask you about the sort of the structure that you've developed of the residencies, and how did you decide to run the residencies the way you run them, and why? How is that different from other residencies? How does it play out in the context of other residency programs, or in the sort of New York art scene infrastructure? Because there is a big
the thing is, I can't speak too much to other structure. I mean, I kind of know, but one of the things why we had to structure it this way is because we don't have physical studios. I mean, we do have physical studios for artists that need studios, and for the contracts where it's stipulated that's in the budget, and then we sublet them. But a lot of the way that we work is because we only have what's considered not too much real estate in New York for a residency program. They either have like whole buildings like ISCP does, or, you know, Triangle, for instance, has like, I don't know how many studios they have, like 7, 8, but, you know, they have like a floor or something. So a lot of the way we work is because we're kind of like, in a sense, constrained by how much space we have, so we have to kind of like work around that. So that was like, that's kind of in the essence why the thing is structured the way it is. Also, like, as we grew, we had to be like more, much more structured the way we do things, because right now, as I said, at average we have 16, sometimes it's 20. When it was about 4 years ago, we jumped 30% of how much residents we have. So at one point when we had like 7 to 8 residents per month, it was a little bit of a different story how we were structured. Once we kind of like grew, we had to kind of shift how we're doing things and how we're kind of like managing the volume of things. So basically certain things had to go on a very, kind of like on a strict rhythm when is what executed, so you can manage the volume that we have with a relatively small staff.
How many of you are there?
Right. Well, it kind of like it shifted over the years. It used to be 3 full-time, 2 part-time. Now it's more 2 full-time, 2 part-time.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, for the amount of people.
Yeah.
But maybe because I'm really interested in sort of how different kinds of residencies sort of can support a different kind of way of, you know, being, because obviously you try to, I think from how I, you know, have seen Residency Unlimited when I was in New York, but also how you were, you know, talking about what people did or didn't do in New York. It feels like it's a combination of really like trying to make a vast networking scheme for the artists that are there, but also trying to produce.
Yeah, it's a mix, but not everyone. The thing is, I don't think we would be able to do it if every artist wanted to kind of produce extensively. I can't say, like, if you have, like, let's say 16 people, not all 16 of them are gonna, like, you know, if you're a painter or a drawer, you have a studio, you go every day to your studio, you don't have really much work to do there, and then maybe they'll, you know, be part of a show or some sort of program. So in those cases, your kind of work on the production side is not as involved, or some artists won't produce at all. You know what I mean? It's not that as if every person that's in residence needs like a heavy hand in aiding them to do whatever they want to do. I mean, cumulatively, yes, but not every particular case is. And that's why I go back to those questionnaires, that's something that's really important for us, because in order to manage well, you have to kind of like pre-prepare a lot of things. So if people tell you until they come that they don't know what they want to do, it's a question, how much can we really be able to help you in 8 weeks if you arrived and then you still don't know, and then you're not going to know another few weeks, and then next thing you know, you're going back home in 4 weeks.
And this is not what you were envisioning.
It's not what, I mean, if you really want our help, we can't. It's just sort of like, it's not possible to...
No, I mean, like the artist that you were talking about, that at the end, this is not what you were envisioning.
Right, right.
I would like to go back maybe to that question that you asked. There was these 4 questions.
Sure. Yeah.
And because like, one thing that's, I think, really important to me is that you don't, or like interesting also, that you don't choose you don't choose the people that come, because you're working.
Sometimes we do. In your case, we don't.
Yeah, I mean.
But it's fine.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm more interested.
Your winners are, I mean, like heavily vetted. You know, you have like this huge jury, and you have one person that's there for 5 years. is it 5 years or 3 years? I forget. 3, you know, so we kind of like have trust in partners, and not just even the YVAA. We have other partners from people around the world, from different institutions that, you know, we know that it's done professionally. And so what was your question?
No, I was just wondering that you are then very often working with people that you did not choose, and the dynamics can be wonderful, but also it can be very sort of, did you ever come across like a big mismatch of, like, I mean,
no, I know what you want to say, but you have to realize we're a residency program. It's not like that the artists that come with us that, you know, we have ambitions to represent them or like do, you know, shows, curate shows with them or do bigger projects. I mean, sometimes it happens, you know, that you end up doing something, but that's not really that's not how the residency kind of functions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's more kind of like you're giving them this experience and trying to help them to do whatever they do. Sometimes you don't really like the work, but you might have like a constructive conversation with them or tell them, hey, maybe you should like read this book and not talk about your work this way because you don't know X, Y, Z. You should consider, you know what I mean? It's not, I don't think it's always about having to be that deeply connected to the work in order to give them some sort of experience that can hopefully have them learn something or give different perspective, or the experience of New York and certain things that they can learn there or see or experience.
Mediation and facilitation of those experiences.
Right. Not purely, but a big part, you know. So we had like one artist right now from Croatia that finished the residency, and first she wanted to maybe produce a body of work. Her work is kind of a little bit like relational aesthetics, but it's very heavily influenced by the context where she lives in Croatia. So we're thinking it doesn't make it all sense for her to do something like in New York, and luckily she then deferred from that and then concentrated all her time on going to see like lectures and group readings and all these things that now like she has all these ideas that she can do like in Zagreb, because she runs a small, she intends to run a small like reading group out of her studio in Croatia, and I think that's probably the best thing for her that she could have done, to like be exposed to all these things rather than trying to produce something that might not have an effect in the context of New York.
This really directly feeds into the question that you're asking there yourself, and I would like to maybe if you could elaborate on that actually, of how does actually Chalupecký or any kind of these awards that have some impact in the local art scene or in regional sense, how does it translate into the New York context then?
Well, I think to be completely honest, I don't think it does. It's just that you are like, yes, obviously it sounds good that you're like a winner. It gives some gravitas that you're a winner of a national award. That definitely does. But I think that at the end of the day, the artist is seen as an artist from the Czech Republic or Slovenia or Albania or whatever that won a national award. I don't think that without really knowing the history of the art scene here, the context, that, you know, it makes any difference. I think that you're seen like it is an artist from a certain country that won an award.
I wanted to say one thing about this YVAA, because this was quite a transition or quite a difference for you, that before employing this network, you were an international residency with different partnerships kind of globally. And then you shifted to this whole region, right? The YVA, as you mentioned, but I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with it, but it's a network of similar kind of projects or through which basically from Prague to Eastern European Balkan context, and so this really changed a lot the proportion of the artists that you have in the residency, right? Because before it was just like a kind of very mixed up international crowd, and now you suddenly get this big, strong regional focus. So how did that change the whole?
Well, it didn't change. It's a fifth. It's 1/5.
Okay, yeah.
Because we work with about 50 residents per year, and this is about 10 per year, sometimes less. So it's a fifth. In a sense, it did, how it changed it, I think that as a whole, it kind of represents a region. It represents artists from a region. In that sense, I think it changed. That there is like a consistent flow of artists from a certain geographic spot that come to the residency.
And do you want to somehow work with this actively, or is it basically that's maybe just developing Zuzana's question, but in terms of the positioning in New York, then I think it became the only residency in New York that is kind of focused on this region. Or I mean, there are of course, I mean.
Isn't Visegrad triangle has the Visegrad?
Yeah, Visegrad is the art in general, but it's not. I mean, that's the kind of smaller part of the region, and then this is really quite a kind of body of.
There is CC Arts Link as well. They host artists through different organizations. So that's another one in terms of residencies. Yeah, but I guess yes, in a consistent way that gets kind of like a chunk. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, because it feels also, it's kind of interesting because you're basically sort of yearly getting the best is a terrible word, but like you're getting sort of like a very, that's maybe again expanding on what Karin said.
Sure.
That it's actually becoming like an archive of what has been happening in a specific region, art-wise, in a sense. Do you maybe, or like, do you have any kind of ambition or, collaborations in mind that this could be somehow expanded, that this could become like a more...
and when you say expanded, in what sense?
In an exhibition sense, or in a sense of combining some kinds of strategies that you find throughout in the years, or like in a sort of like, if you've ever thought about working with it in a deeper curatorial way, and maybe looking back at the years that you've hosted these artists, if it's even in your capacity, maybe.
Well, the thing is, it's not. The thing is, that's something that is not in our capacity, but that's something that could be brought up. It's too bad that Karina left now, but because we have these biannual meetings with the whole group, with the YVAA group and the funders every 2 years, and the next one is going to be in Bulgaria, and actually the host of the Bulgarian organization has a gallery, and she's planning to do some sort of exhibition of all the YVAA things. But that's something that's not really, I mean, that's more something to discuss with the whole group in our regional meetings that we could do, because it's really not something that we have the capacity to do. But as a whole group, that at our next regional meeting, which is going to be in a year, we could discuss.
And also maybe this is a very naive question, or like because I feel like a lot of that probably changes and it varies from like person to person, but I think a lot of people coming to New York are overwhelmed and would like to come back or would like to spend more time. Or is there any, like, do you host people 2 times, for example? Like, do you do consecutive projects? And just maybe like a gossip, like, did anyone come and stay?
Yeah, there are people that that stayed and then, you know, got a like O1 visa or whatever. But sometimes rarely, but there are sometimes artists that do return. But then the case is you have to fundraise for that, because all these costs that we cover right now is done through a grant that we get every year just for this amount of like 11 or 10 residents from different regions. So that would mean like coming up with a different strategy how to fundraise to get there for a project or a second residency.
I was just wondering.
Maybe I lose from the beginning, but have you established it? What the main idea was? Have you started?
Oh, you mean how we started?
Yes.
How we started the program?
Yes, it was a command, it was the idea of someone, it was opportunity to use it.
Well, when it started, I wasn't employed. I was only on the board first, but it was two of my colleagues that started it because they worked for another residency in New York before that, that had a different format, and they wanted to start something new, and they just started working with one German artist out of my colleague's apartment, and then 10 years later, it grew into what it is today.
So it was, you say, something new, to develop something new?
Yeah, they wanted to develop a different, they worked, I didn't work in residency programs before this. I used to work in a commercial gallery as a director, but was on the board, but they wanted to, you know, they worked in a different residency program in New York, and they wanted to do a different format and wanted to experiment. No, I was on the board. I was on the board first. Like in the United States, like if you have a nonprofit organization, you have a board of directors. So it's kind of like a volunteer, although you contribute money, it's a volunteer job where you're kind of like an advisor, or you contribute money to the organization. So that's how I kind of started with it. And then slowly afterwards, I kind of built the business with them over the course of like 8 years, but very, very part-time first and stuff, because we didn't have any money. You know, it started super small, but then over the years it grew.
So they use some practice from previous?
They did, yeah. I think that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.